Everybody, it's Guy again from beautiful Vancouver, Canada. And we're going to talk about, the war on drugs, the criminalization of drug users, drug policy, and just its impacts on us as a society. The war on drugs is created to reduce drug use, which has, failed miserably. It's actually gone from defeat to complete debacle of epic proportions. It's actually created more drug use, and it's globally, it's over a $400 billion a year industry. And it's, that our drug policies are just as deadly as the drugs themselves. And in a lot of our countries across the world, we're looking at severe high rates of overdose deaths. And this is really a drug policy massacre. And for governments to stare at it in the face for decades and decades and absolutely allow this to continue, it shows me personally that they support organized crime, because they're not supporting the people that are struggling. Organized crime has had a field day at making money hand over fist. It's created money laundering, drug overdose, gang violence, housing unaffordability, and we as people pay for that, and people pay for that with their lives. Innocent bystanders get killed in drug transactions and drug turf wars. It's literally one of these things that needs to end, and governments have the power and authority to act, but why don't they? It astounds me that the lack of effort in allowing overdose deaths to continue, and while letting organized crime continue their reign of terror across the world, has really created this mass incarceration. It's impacted, especially the minority groups have been targeted. It's racially motivated, and it's one of those things where we put people in prison, the criminalization of drug users, and prison is an environment that doesn't implement change. It's not about rehabilitation. It's literally about incarceration. And this continues. And once you're locked into that, and I was locked into that for many years in my life, it becomes this never-ending cycle of prison, parole violation, overdose deaths. These things just, you can't break this cycle, and it's because people aren't supported. Then we have these drug courts where it shows the stigma and discrimination that drugs are bad and we will punish you or give you an option at going to drug court, but they put these rigid regulations on you, which lead you back to prison, and you again go through this cycle. And most people, when they are released from prison, especially if you're struggling with a substance use disorder, within an hour of being released, every time I was released, I went to use drugs, and it's because nothing changed. Your tolerance goes down in prison. Also, to what people don't understand is that once that cage door slams behind you and you've entered the prison facility or the federal penitentiary, I'm telling you, it's not about change. It's about survival and trying to get out of there, especially if you're only doing a couple years and one of your peers tells you, I'll give you the best advice that I'd ever gotten in there was from an old timer that said, make a weapon. It's better to have one and not need it than to need it and not have it. And that doesn't give you the environment of, trying to better yourself to get out and try to, you're really in there to protect yourself at all times. And I've witnessed massive, there's honestly, sometimes there's more drugs in the prison system than there could be in an area on the street. And it's run by, different gangs that are in the jail. And this is something that creates heavy violence in the prison system. A lot of people either pay with their life, there's riots. And then when the drugs don't make it into the system, that also starts violence. So it's just this mass disaster of epic proportions, and we really need to look at, you know, how do we change this? And the one thing that it really needs to happen is just end the war on drugs. Stop criminalizing drug users for drug use. Prohibition, I mean, legalization is one of these things. If we had a safer, regulated supply of drugs, then we could at least, you know, compete with the illicit drug market by giving drug users the clean version of the drugs that they're seeking. And this can happen if you look at, you know, citizens that are have a lot of money. They can have a doctor that can prescribe them these medications or drugs that they can use. And while, you know, I'm sure that these people that have a lot of money that are using drugs aren't, you know, they're breaking the law, but they're not going to jail for it because the doctor's prescribing them the cleaner versions of these drugs. And this needs to happen just for everybody. I mean, in Vancouver, you know, I've witnessed it just get completely worse over the last 3 decades to the point where the harder the enforcement, the harder the drugs, and this is creating, you know, what we've gone from heroin to fentanyl, and it's all fentanyl in British Columbia. It's looking for heroin here is like looking for a needle in a haystack. 5 people will die today in British Columbia due to a drug overdose. And that's 5 people every day, all day. And as a person that's witnessed mass deaths of overdose deaths of friends that I've known over the years, it breaks my heart that this is continuing, and allowing overdose deaths to continue won't stop drug users from using drugs. So our approach needs to change. And unless we change this, we are going to run into the same things over and over. And honestly, the generation that's in the rearview mirror, our youth, are going to be the ones that are going to be impacted the most. And I can't and I won't stop fighting, because I don't want anyone to go through what I had to go through to get to where I had to get to today. My wife often describes it to me as I have scars from pretty much my forehead down to my toe. And I remember her describing it. It's like, she said, looks like you were just like in a war because my body is so scarred up. And I said, yeah, it's the drug war. And it really, what it did is it isolated me in areas to use drugs alone repeatedly, the health consequences that occurred because of the drug use. If we had, you know, in the 80s and 90s, a clean facility like we do today, I'm sure a lot of those scars wouldn't be on my body today. And that's just the impacts, not here in Canada. This is worldwide. It's a global problem, and it needs to stop. And hopefully, I know your challenges in the UK, Scotland, where there, you know, people are being arrested for putting up supervised consumption sites. And these are vital harm reduction facilities that must continue to be implemented in our society. They're actually vital to the survival of drug users, and so that people, if needed, can receive the help that they need and the support that they need. Us as a society spending money on the war on drugs is just absolutely crazy. We are spending so much money to fight this, when if we ended the war on drugs and took the money that we are using to fight it and put it into harm reduction services, treatment services, safer pharmaceutical drug services, we could actually save a boatload of money, because the money that we're spending right now is just like throwing money into a fireplace on the war on drugs. We need to end that, change that, and support the drug users where they're at, and stop meeting our governments and medical professionals where they're at, because people are dying at an alarming rate, and this needs to stop immediately. And all the power to you guys out in the UK and you know, all over Europe. Solidarity from Vancouver, Canada. I support you and your work, and anything I can ever do to help, please just reach out, and thanks for listening. And I hope this inspires some change for people, that we are pushing our government here, and I know that if we continue to push, our voices will break through and will be heard. Thanks for listening.